If we start with the international front, of course, a lot of time has been spent at these meetings in Washington this week talking about debt loads for emerging markets. How concerned are you about the stress and distress that we're going to see emerging markets with high debt loads facing?
Well, the meetings, good morning, first of all, a pleasure to be with you. The meetings this week have been marked, I think, by Russia's war against Ukraine. It has not been business as usual, and we have discussed the different economic and financial vulnerabilities because of the global impact of this aggression. One of the key issues we have been discussing is how to reinforce financial support for most vulnerable countries, and in particular those that had already a high debt burden before the war broke, and this new wave of downward growth revisions have started.
Well, as you say, the war in Ukraine dominated the conversation, Minister. So let's talk more about that. I was just speaking of the headline out of the Bundesbank earlier about if there were to be an embargo on Russian gas, Germany would fall into a recession. What about Spain's view? Would you support a Europe-wide embargo on fossil fuels from Russia?
Spain is in a very different position because we have a much smaller direct exposure to Russia. We do not depend at all on Russia's gas, coal, or oil, and that puts us in a different position with regards to the potential economic impact. We have been from the beginning strongly supporting Ukraine, condemning in the strongest possible terms Russia's aggression, and supporting effective sanctions.
We're just having a few problems.
We all have, which is stopping these wars as soon as possible.
Apologies, just having a few issues with the sound. I think it's righted itself, so we'll carry on, Minister. Just to clarify then, if you are less reliant on Russian energy, would you support an EU ban on Russian oil and gas?
I think the top priority from the European perspective is to remain united. We have been united to provide a strong, determined response to the pandemic 2 years ago. We are also united now when agreeing on the sanctions, which should be effective in the sense of stopping the war and having the minimum negative impact on our own economies, of course.
Okay, well, let's talk about your economy then in particular. Of course, as you say, you are less sensitive to Russian fossil fuels than, say, the likes of Germany, which, again, there is a risk that potentially it would fall into recession. What are your forecasts for growth in Spain in particular, and also on inflation?
We are just finalizing the macroeconomic scenario to accompany our draft budget, which we will be disclosing and presenting next week on Tuesday. So allow me not to give specific numbers right now, but I can say that despite the downward revision of growth forecast throughout the world and in Europe in particular, Spain is foreseen to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, of the large economies during 2022 and 2023. The IMF just issued their forecast last week, or in the beginning of this week, where they foresee growth in Spain to be 4.8% this year, thus making the country one of the engines for growth in Europe.
And one of the ways that you're trying to shield your population from the higher cost of living and higher energy prices, Minister, is by applying to the European Commission to apply a cap to gas prices. How confident are you that you will achieve that 30 euros per megawatt hour cap that you've asked for?
Indeed, one of our problems, more than 70% of the general price index rise in Spain is due to inflation in the energy markets. There is an overweight of gas prices in the Spanish regulatory system and also in our general price index. And we want to decouple the Iberian market from international gas prices as much as possible. We're working very intensely with the European Commission with a view to having the approval and as soon as possible being able to cap wholesale prices in our electricity markets with a view to bringing down inflation as soon as possible too.
If you succeed in bringing that cap to fruition, what would be the direct impact on inflation in Spain? How much can it ease?
It depends on the hour of the day and the marginal technology that's going going to be closing the wholesale electricity market. If it is with renewables, we're talking about extremely low prices in the wholesale market, below 10 euros per megawatt hour. That could bring the energy bill around 50% down, and that would have a very direct impact on prices, of course, on the general price index. Our objective is that as soon as possible, we start a downward trend of inflation, as this is the most direct impact of the war in our economy.
Yeah. Minister, do you think that the European Union should be doing more to flex its size when it comes to buying energy on international markets? Could Europe be getting a better deal for energy if it were to buy collectively instead of in a more piecemeal fashion?
Indeed. Since last year, we started seeing the rise in energy prices, and we were worried about it because of this a faster reaction of the Spanish market. We already sounded the alarm bell last year. Unfortunately, time has proven that we were right, that this was a more structural issue. And one of the proposals that we put on the table already then was to have joint buying of energy in wholesale markets. The EU is a strong economy, is a very important buyer, and we should indeed have a stronger voice when negotiating with the energy and raw material generating countries.
A final question from me, Minister. Of course, there is a big event in Europe over the weekend. That would be the French presidential election. We just got the latest polling data. Macron leading Le Pen 55.5% to 45.5%. What is at stake for Europe more broadly in this election?
I think it is indeed a very important election because it will, I hope, stop very clearly the rise of populism, which is threatening many countries around the world. Our populations are very tired after the 2 years of pandemic, and now the war is generating additional uncertainties. And it is important to stop this kind of populistic messages, which provide miracle solutions, which of course address none of the challenges, but weaken our democracy.